Kendi was in her small apartment, folding laundry with the hum of the city drifting in through the open window, when her phone rang. It was her mother. She answered with a smile, but the words that followed wiped it away in seconds. Her mother's voice was firm, almost cold, as she told Kendi she was no longer invited to her sister Tumi's wedding. The reason? A misunderstanding from months ago that Kendi thought had been forgotten. Her mother said it was Kendi's fault for disrespecting the family, and before Kendi could even defend herself, the call ended. She stood there frozen, a pair of folded trousers slipping from her hands to the floor. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. Tumi had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Kendi had learned to live with that, but this being cut off from one of the biggest moments in her sister's life felt like a punch straight to the chest. She sank onto the couch, her phone still in her hand, her heart racing. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was the feeling that no matter what she did, her mother would always see her as the outsider in her own family. The next morning, Kendi sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sun pour over the rooftops. Her mind kept replaying her mother's voice, the sharpness in her tone, the finality in her words. Growing up, she had always been taught that family comes first, that keeping the peace is more important than speaking your mind. Her mother had built her whole life on that belief, never questioning traditions, always following the rules of the community. She was respected for it, almost feared. But for Kendi, those same rules felt like chains, tightening every time she tried to live differently. She decided to distract herself and dressed in one of her favorite outfits, a flowing Ankara dress in bold gold and green, the kind that made her feel rooted yet free. She wrapped her hair in a matching headscarf and stepped out into the busy streets. The market was alive with colors and voices, people haggling over prices, children darting between stalls. As she walked past a fabric shop, she slowed down to touch a roll of soft Kent cloth. That's when she heard two women chatting behind her. They were discussing a wedding, laughing about how only the most respectable people make it onto the guest list, and how bridesmaids should be chosen carefully to avoid embarrassing the family. Kendi froze for a moment. Their words cut deep, not because they were about her specifically, but because they echoed exactly how her family must have discussed her. Someone unfit, someone who didn't belong. She moved on quickly, pretending not to hear, but her chest ached. Every bright color around her suddenly felt heavy, as if it was reminding her that no matter how beautifully she dressed, tradition would always find a way to decide where she did and didn't belong. Kendi decided she couldn't carry the weight of this silence any longer. Maybe if she went home and spoke face to face, things could be fixed. She put on a simple dress, tied her hair back, and took the long bus ride to the family house. The familiar streets stirred memories, her and Tumi playing outside as kids, their mother calling them in for dinner. But as she reached the gate, those warm memories clashed with the cold reality she was about to face. Her mother opened the door, her face tight and unreadable. She didn't hug Kendi. She didn't even smile. "You're here," was all she said before stepping aside. Inside, the house was buzzing with wedding preparations, flowers, fabrics, people moving in and out with dresses and boxes. Tumi was in the living room, surrounded by friends, trying on her gown. She looked beautiful, glowing with happiness. For a moment, Kendi's heart softened, but when Tumi glanced up and saw her, the smile faded. "I'm busy, Kendi," she said flatly, turning back to the mirror. Kendi stood there, feeling like a stranger in her own home. She tried to talk to her mother in the kitchen, but every word she spoke was met with short, distracted replies. No one asked how she was. No one invited her to join in. Later, she stepped outside into the yard, leaning against the wall. Through the window she could still see the laughter, the dresses, the joyful chaos. It was a celebration she had once dreamed of being part of. Now it was happening without her. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears, and realized she wasn't just excluded from the guest list. She had been pushed out of the family's heart. The joy inside the house felt like a cruel mirror, reflecting everything she had lost. A few days later, Kendi was walking through the city center, her mind still heavy from her visit home, when she heard someone call her name. She turned and saw Zara, her old friend from university, walking toward her with the same bold smile she remembered. Zara looked different now. Her hair was cropped short and dyed a fiery red. Her outfit was stylish and modern with just a touch of African print. She carried herself like someone who didn't care what the world thought. They hugged tightly and soon they were sitting in a small cafe, catching up over cups of spiced tea. Zara's life was nothing like the polished, tradition-bound people Kendi's family admired. She ran her own design business, traveled often, and spoke openly about refusing to live according to anyone else's rules. I learned early, Zara said, leaning forward, that if you keep waiting for approval, you'll spend your whole life standing in the same place. Kendi smiled faintly but her chest ached. She told Zara about the wedding, about her mother's coldness, and the constant feeling that she wasn't enough. Zara listened without interrupting, then shook her head. Kendi, you've been trying to fit into a mold that was never made for you. You have talent. You have vision. Why are you wasting your life trying to prove yourself to people who have already decided you don't belong? The words hit Kendi like a spark in the dark. No one had ever told her it was okay to stop trying, to simply live for herself. Zara's confidence was contagious, her laughter, her unapologetic honesty. As they parted, Zara hugged her again and whispered, "Your voice is yours. Don't let anyone silence it." Walking home, Kendi felt something shift inside her. It wasn't full courage yet, but it was a beginning, a small seed of defiance that had finally been planted. That night, Kendi lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the city lights casting faint shadows across her room. Sleep refused to come. Her mind was too loud, filled with flashes of conversations, memories, and Zara's voice telling her not to live for approval. She thought about all the time she had bent over backward for her family, taking extra jobs to help pay for Tumi's school fees, canceling her own plans to babysit cousins, keeping quiet during arguments just to keep the peace. She had swallowed her opinions, dressed the way they wanted, even attended community events she hated, all because she believed it would make them see her as a good daughter, a good sister. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. Her mother had always said Kendi's ideas were too modern, her dreams too risky. Tumi's ambitions, marrying well, fitting neatly into tradition, were celebrated. Kendi's ambitions, on the other hand, were treated like rebellious mistakes. It hurt in a way she couldn't explain, because deep down she knew they had never really tried to understand her heart. She rolled onto her side, clutching her pillow, her chest heavy. For so long, she had been the outsider in her own family, quietly carrying that weight. But tonight something felt different. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she was tired of shrinking herself to fit a space that was never meant for her. She could still hear Zara's words in her head. "Your voice is yours. Don't let anyone silence it." Kendi's lips curled into a faint smile in the dark. Maybe she didn't have to keep waiting for them to see her worth. Maybe she could create a life where their approval didn't matter. The thought was small, fragile, but it was alive. A seed of defiance had been planted, and for the first time in years, Kendi felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The morning of Tumi's wedding arrived bright and full of celebration for everyone else, but for Kendi it felt heavy. She sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone. Part of her wondered if she should just go, swallow her pride, and pretend nothing had happened. But the ache in her chest reminded her of all the cold stares, the unspoken insults, the way she had been pushed aside. Going would only mean betraying herself. She took a deep breath and typed out a message. Her fingers hesitated over each word. "I wish you both a beautiful wedding day. I hope it's everything you dreamed of. I won't be attending, not because I don't care, but because I can't pretend I haven't been hurt by the way I've been treated." She read it twice, fighting the urge to delete it, then hit send. The minutes that followed felt like hours. She kept checking her phone, her heartbeat quickening every time the screen lit up. Finally, her mother replied. It was short, just one sentence. "Do whatever you think is best." No warmth, no love, no attempt to understand. Just distance. Kendi stared at the message, her eyes stinging. It wasn't just the words, it was the coldness behind them, the final proof that she had made the right choice. She put her phone down and looked out the window. Somewhere across the city, her family was laughing, dancing, taking pictures in bright clothes. She wasn't there, but for the first time she didn't feel like she had lost something. Instead, there was a strange, quiet relief in knowing she had chosen herself. The decision hurt, but it also set her free. And in that freedom, she felt the first hint of strength returning to her bones. The day after the wedding, Kendi woke up early, not because she had to, but because her mind wouldn't let her rest. The air felt different, lighter somehow. She brewed a cup of coffee and sat at her small desk, scrolling through her phone. Photos from the wedding filled social media, but instead of making her feel sad, they made her feel sure she'd done the right thing. As she put her phone down, her eyes drifted to her wardrobe. Inside were the clothes she loved, bright ochre prints, bold Kent fabrics, pieces she had designed and sewn herself over the years. She ran her fingers over the patterns and felt a spark. What if she could turn this into something bigger? Not just a hobby but a business. A brand that celebrated African tradition but added her own fearless twist. Designs that told a story, her story. The more she thought about it, the more her heart raced. She grabbed a notebook and began scribbling ideas, brand names, color palettes, sketches of dresses and jackets. She imagined women wearing her designs to weddings, markets, city streets, walking proudly, feeling powerful. By afternoon, she was online researching suppliers, fabrics, and business licenses. She watched videos about marketing and read articles about successful African designers. She even made a mood board on her wall, pinning scraps of fabric and photos that inspired her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about her family's approval. She was thinking about possibility. She was building something that was hers alone, something that didn't need permission from anyone. As the sun set, Kendi looked around her room, now scattered with fabric swatches and open notebooks. She smiled to herself. This wasn't just about clothes. This was about reclaiming her voice, her pride, and her place in the world. And she was ready to rise. The first time Kendi wore one of her own designs to an event, her hands shook as she zipped up the dress. It was a bold piece, rich emerald green with gold embroidery along the neckline. The kind of dress that announced its presence before she even spoke. For years she had toned herself down, choosing outfits that wouldn't draw too much attention. But tonight she wanted to be seen. She walked into the rooftop gathering slowly, her heart pounding, but within minutes, people began to notice. A woman she didn't know stopped her mid-step to ask, "Where did you get that dress?" Another leaned in and whispered, "You look incredible." Each compliment felt like a drop of water on soil that had been dry for too long. Kendi found herself standing taller, smiling wider. She laughed easily, joined conversations, and didn't feel the need to hide in a corner. For the first time, she wasn't just wearing a dress. She was wearing her story, her courage, her refusal to stay invisible. Over the next few weeks, she wore more of her own creations to small business meetups, art shows, and even casual coffee dates. People began asking if she sold her clothes, if she had a shop or an online page. Some took her number. Others followed her on social media after she posted photos. Every time she stepped out in her designs, it was like reclaiming a piece of herself she had lost to years of silence and compromise. She no longer dressed to please her mother, her sister, or the community's judgment. She dressed for Kendi, for the woman she was becoming. And each smile from a stranger, each question about her clothes, reminded her she was on the right path. She was no longer the forgotten sister or the black sheep. She was Kendi, unapologetic, vibrant, and alive. One Saturday afternoon, Kendi attended a small cultural fair in the city, wearing one of her latest designs, a flowing red and black dress with hand-stitched beadwork on the sleeves. She had gone there to network, maybe hand out a few business cards she had recently printed, but she didn't expect the encounter that would change everything. While browsing through a jewelry stall, a tall man in a sharp linen suit approached her. "Excuse me," he said with a warm smile, "but that dress, it's stunning. Which designer made it?" Kendi hesitated for a second before saying softly, "I did." His eyebrows rose. "You?" He asked her about her process, her inspiration, and before she knew it, they were sitting at a cafe nearby, deep in conversation. His name was Kwame, an entrepreneur who had invested in several small African fashion brands. "Kendi," he said, leaning forward, "you have something special. Your designs feel authentic but also fresh. If you're serious about building a business, I'd like to invest." Her heart skipped a beat. No one had ever spoken to her with that kind of confidence before. Not about her talent, not about her future. She felt a rush of excitement and fear at the same time. Could she really do this? Over the next week, they met again to discuss ideas, pop-up shows, an online store, collaborations with local artisans. Each meeting made her feel more alive, more certain that this was what she was meant to do. At home, she kept it all to herself. Her mother and sister had no idea she was laying the foundation for something big. And for the first time, Kendi realized she didn't need them to know, not yet. Her success didn't require their permission or their applause. She was building a future on her own terms, and it felt like freedom. One evening, Kendi's phone buzzed with a call from her mother. It was unusual for her to call so late, and Kendi felt a small knot form in her stomach as she answered. At first, her mother's tone was calm, almost gentle. She asked how Kendi was doing, then quickly got to the point. She had heard from someone in the community that Kendi was wasting her time, making clothes instead of focusing on finding a respectable path in life. "I thought by now you'd settle down," her mother said, her voice sharpening. "A good job, a husband, a place in the family. This fashion thing, it's not what we raised you for." Kendi felt the familiar sting of being misunderstood. She tried to explain that her business was more than just making clothes. It was about telling stories, celebrating culture, and creating something of her own. But her mother didn't see it that way. The conversation turned into a heated back and forth. Her mother spoke of tradition, of the pride that came from fulfilling one's role in the family and community. Kendi spoke of independence, of the need to live a life true to herself. "Why can't you be like your sister?" her mother finally said. Kendi's chest tightened, but she took a deep breath. "Because I'm not her mama. And I don't want to be. I'm building something that matters to me. I'm not asking for your approval anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before her mother muttered, "You've changed," and hung up. Kendi sat there, phone still in her hand, her pulse racing. Yes, she had changed. She was no longer the quiet daughter who bowed her head and followed rules she didn't believe in. This was her life, her path, and she had no intention of turning back. The morning of Tumi's wedding arrived with the sound of distant church bells and the hum of celebration drifting through the city. Kendi knew her family would already be dressed in their finest, posing for photos, laughing and sharing memories without her. But instead of feeling regret, she slipped into one of her newest designs, a sleek royal blue dress with hand-painted patterns, and headed to a completely different kind of event. It was a women's business brunch in a hotel ballroom, filled with the energy of ambition and possibility. The room sparkled with color, bold African prints, sharp suits and jewelry that told stories. As Kendi walked in, heads turned, and she was welcomed like she belonged there. She joined a table of women who spoke about building companies, surviving setbacks, and turning pain into power. One woman shared how she had started her business after being told she wasn't smart enough. Another spoke about leaving an unhappy marriage to pursue her dreams. Every story lit a fire inside Kendi. These women weren't waiting for permission. They were claiming their lives with both hands. At one point, someone asked about her dress and Kendi proudly said, "It's my own design." The table erupted with interest, and she passed around her business card, watching as people saved her number in their phones. Later, during the keynote speech, she thought about the wedding happening across town. The world her family cherished was filled with rules she could never fully obey. Here in this room she felt free. The contrast was sharp, but it didn't make her sad. It made her certain. As she left the event with new contacts and fresh ideas swirling in her head, Kendi smiled. Her sister's wedding was a beautiful chapter for her sister. But Kendi's own story was just beginning, and it was one she was writing entirely on her own terms. A week later, Kendi was sipping tea at her desk when her phone started buzzing nonstop with notifications. First, she thought it was just social media chatter until she saw it. Right there, on the glossy cover of a popular African fashion magazine, was her dress. The headline read, "Kendi Couture, the new face of bold African fashion." Her heart pounded as she flipped through the pages online, seeing her designs styled on models, her name printed in bold letters. They had called her work fearless, modern yet rooted in tradition, and a voice for a new generation of African women. She barely had time to take it in when her phone rang. It was Zara. "Kendi, I just saw the magazine." "Girl, you've done it." Zara's laughter was warm and proud. "This is only the beginning. I hope you know that." Kendi felt her eyes sting. It was one thing to dream. It was another to see the dream alive, recognized and celebrated. She opened Instagram to post a thank you note, and while scrolling, came across photos from Tumi's wedding. The images were beautiful golden dresses, wide smiles, perfect table settings. For a moment she stared at them, but instead of the old ache in her chest, she felt nothing heavy. Just a calm knowing. She hadn't missed out on anything. She had simply chosen a different path. One that didn't require her to fit into the narrow space her family had made for her. She realized she had outgrown that life the way a butterfly outgrows its cocoon. Closing the wedding post, she turned back to the magazine feature, her name shining against the page. This was her world now, one she had built with her own hands, her own courage. And it was only getting brighter. One quiet evening, as Kendi was sketching new designs in her small but sunlit studio, her phone lit up with her mother's name. She hesitated for a second, her heart beating faster. The last few conversations had been full of tension and sharp words, but something inside told her to pick up this time. Her mother's voice was softer than she remembered. "Kendi, my child," she began, pausing as if choosing each word carefully. "I have been thinking about you a lot. I realize now that I did not understand your dreams. I thought you were running away from tradition, but maybe you were running towards something greater." Kendi felt her throat tighten. She had waited years to hear her mother speak to her like this. "I am sorry for the things I said, for the way I made you feel unwanted," her mother continued. "I thought I was protecting you, but I see now I was only holding you back." Kendi took a deep breath, the silence between them thick with old wounds and new hope. "Mama," she said gently, "I forgive you. I really do. But I also need you to understand my life, my choices. They're mine to make now. I'm not that scared girl anymore." Her mother's voice cracked. "You will always be my daughter. And I will always be your daughter," Kendi replied, a small smile forming. "But I've found a path that gives me purpose, that allows me to help others. I can't turn back to fit into the old mold, even if I wanted to." There was a long pause, then her mother sighed. "Then I will pray for you on this path." When Kendi hung up, her chest felt lighter, not because everything was perfect, but because she had finally broken free from the guilt that had shadowed her for years. This was her life now, and she was living it on her terms. The night of the launch felt like a dream Kendi had once scribbled in a worn-out notebook, but now it was real. The venue was glowing with golden lights, the runway lined with fresh flowers and shimmering fabric. Every seat was filled. Fashion editors, entrepreneurs, and women who had once sat with her over coffee, sharing stories of struggle and survival. The air buzzed with excitement. Backstage, Kendi took one last look at her models, each one wearing a piece from her debut collection, Rise. The designs told her story. Bold cuts for bravery, soft flowing fabrics for resilience, and bright African prints for the roots she refused to forget. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from the joy of finally owning her place in the world. As the lights dimmed and the music started, Kendi stepped onto the stage. Applause erupted, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She scanned the crowd and spotted Zara in the front row, clapping with tears in her eyes. Beside her were women Kendi admired, CEOs, community leaders, and even young girls who looked at her like she was proof that dreams were possible. "Thank you for being here," Kendi began, her voice steady. Kendi Couture is more than clothes. It's a celebration of choosing yourself, of refusing to shrink to fit into someone else's box. If my journey tells you anything, let it be this. You are enough just as you are. The room erupted again in applause, and as the first model walked out, Kendi stepped back, letting her work speak for itself. She could feel her past. Every rejection, every insult, every tear, fading into the background. This was her moment, but it was also bigger than her. When the final look closed the show, the crowd stood to their feet. Kendi smiled through tears. She hadn't just built a brand. She had built a legacy. The city was alive that morning, street vendors calling out their prices, music spilling from shop radios, the scent of roasted corn and fresh flowers mixing in the air. Kendi walked down the bustling road, her head high, the hem of her bold Ankara dress swaying with each step. People turned to look, not just at her clothes, but at the confidence she wore like a crown. Billboards flashed her latest campaign. Smiling models in Kendi Couture designs, right above the same streets where she once carried her sketchbook, wondering if anyone would ever believe in her. Now she didn't need belief from others. She had built her own. A group of young girls spotted her and ran over giggling. "Miss Kendi, we love your dresses," one of them squealed. She bent down, smiled, and told them, "Always wear your dreams as proudly as you wear your clothes." Their eyes lit up and she knew they understood. As she kept walking, she thought about her family, not with anger anymore but with peace. She no longer needed their permission to be happy. She no longer chased their approval. Her worth was no longer up for debate. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the city. Kendi smiled to herself. Her future wasn't just bright. It was hers. Every stitch, every choice, every step had led her here. And this time she was walking forward without looking back.